There are stories the moon keeps to herself. Stories written not in ink, but in instinct, in the pull of tides, in the howl that splits a silent night and makes every creature, human or otherwise, stop breathing for just one trembling moment. This is one of those stories. It begins, as most dangerous things do, with a woman who should have turned back. Her name was Alara Voss, 26 years old, a wildlife researcher with ink-stained fingers, a battered field journal, and an absolute refusal to be afraid of the dark. She had spent 3 years studying the forests of the Cascades, cataloging wolf behavior, tracking pack movements, sleeping in tents while the world beyond the canvas breathed and growled and lived without her permission. She was good at her work. She was even better at being alone. That night, the 14th of October, the night of the blood moon, Alara had driven 3 hours from the nearest town to reach the ridge the locals simply called the Black Rim. She had been warned, of course. The woman at the gas station had touched her arm with cold fingers and said, "Don't go up there tonight, honey." The ranger at the trailhead had looked at her like she was already a ghost. Alara had smiled politely and gone anyway. The blood moon rose at 9:43. She saw it crest the tree line from her position on the ridge, enormous, swollen, a deep and burning amber that bled into red at its edges, as though the sky itself had been wounded. Her camera's shutter clicked rapidly. Her breath fogged in the cold. She was so consumed by the sight above her that she did not hear what was happening below. She did not hear the silence fall. Because that is what the forest does when something ancient moves through it. It goes utterly, completely, desperately quiet. No crickets. No wind. Not even the creak of a branch. Just nothing. And then a sound. Low. Rhythmic. Getting closer. Footsteps. Alara turned slowly. He stood at the edge of the tree line, 40 feet away, and he was watching her. The man, if she could call him that, if that word was even large enough to hold what he was, stood well over 6 feet, shoulders broad enough to block the moonlight behind him. His dark hair was disheveled, his jaw sharp and shadowed with several days of stubble. He wore a shirt that had been torn at the collar, and his chest rose and fell with a rhythm that was too slow, too controlled, the breathing of something that was trying very, very hard to hold itself still. His eyes were the color of molten gold. Not brown catching the light. Not hazel in the right conditions. Gold. Pure, luminous, burning gold. The kind of eyes that had no business existing in a human face, and some instinct in Alara, something older than language, told her immediately and without question, those are not human eyes. She should have run. She knew she should have run. Her legs didn't move. He didn't move either. They stood there on that moonlit ridge, a woman and a monster, a researcher and a revelation, and the air between them was so charged it almost hummed. Alara could feel it against her skin, a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature, a pressure at the center of her chest like something reaching for her from the inside. She had studied wolves for 3 years. She had read everything ever written about pack behavior, about territorial instinct, about the way an alpha holds itself differently from the rest, a quality in the posture, a certainty in the stillness. She had never felt watched like this, like she was the only thing in the world worth looking at, like he'd been looking for her, specifically, for a very long time. He took 1 step forward. Her heart slammed once, hard, against her ribs. He stopped. His jaw tightened. His hands, she noticed, were clenched at his sides, like he was fighting something, like the distance between them was costing him something she couldn't name. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough, scraped raw at the edges, like a sound that had been held in too long. "You need to leave this ridge." A pause. "Now." It was a warning. She understood that. She also understood, with a certainty that made absolutely no logical sense, that he was not warning her about the forest. He was warning her about himself. Alara Voss was not a reckless woman. She was precise, methodical. She made lists. She packed emergency kits. She filed location reports before every field expedition. Recklessness, she had always believed, was what happened when you let feeling override thinking. So she could not explain, not then, not later, not even to herself, why instead of backing away from the golden-eyed stranger on the ridge, she took a step toward him. Something crossed his face.
Pain.
Or something close to it. His head dropped slightly, like the movement had cost him, like her getting closer was both the worst and the best thing that could happen. I said leave. His voice was harder now. A command. The kind of voice that expected to be obeyed without question. I heard you, Alara said, and her own voice surprised her, steady, when her heartbeat was anything but. She stopped 6 feet from him. This close, she could see the details the distance had hidden. The tension in every line of his body. The way his breathing had changed, deeper now, slower, like he was measuring each inhale. There was something near his temple, a scar, pale and old, cutting through his hairline in a thin crescent shape. And his eyes. His eyes hadn't left her face. Who are you? She asked. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Someone you don't want to know. I'll decide that. Something shifted in those golden eyes, something that might have been surprise under other circumstances. As if he had expected fear and received something else entirely, and didn't know what to do with it. Alara. She went very still. My name, she said carefully, is on my field badge. He glanced at the badge clipped to her jacket, then back to her face. Alara, he said again, quieter this time, like the word was something he was trying out, something he was deciding he wanted to keep. The warmth in her chest deepened. You have to go, he said. His voice had changed. The command was gone. What was left sounded almost like pleading. I can't, he stopped. His hands unclenched and reclenched. Tonight is not a safe night. For you. Near me. What happens to me near you tonight? He looked at her for a long moment. The blood moon above them had climbed higher, burning its red-amber light across the ridge, painting everything in shades of crimson and shadow. An owl called once in the distance, and then even that sound dissolved. Things I can't take back, he said at last. And Alara, logical, methodical, list-making Alara, felt something bloom in her chest that she had no category for. She should have been afraid. She was not. His name, he told her eventually, was Cale Duskmore. He was the alpha of a pack that ran the Black Rim, had run it for generations, his family's territory stretching back further than the town below had existed. He told her this standing with his back against a pine tree, arms crossed, eyes alternating between her face and the middle distance, like looking at her too long was a specific kind of danger he was managing carefully. Alara sat on a boulder 10 feet away, her field journal open in her lap, but she hadn't written a word. She was listening to him the way she listened to the forest, completely, without interruption, giving the thing in front of her all the space it needed to reveal itself. He was 32. He had taken over leadership of the pack at 24 when his father died. There were 11 others. They did not live as wolves, they were not animals. He said this with a quiet firmness that told her the distinction mattered deeply to him. They were people who carried something ancient inside them, something tied to the moon's cycle, to the land, to each other. And to mates, Alara said. He went absolutely still. His eyes cut to her face, sharp, startled. Searching. I've read the folklore, she said quietly. Pack culture. Bonding. The concept of a fated mate. The word sat between them in the cold air, like something living. Cale said nothing for a long moment. When he did speak, his voice was careful, controlled, like a man choosing each word from a limited supply. It isn't folklore. Alara's heart rate did something irregular. Is that what this is? She asked. The words came out softer than she intended. Whatever I've been feeling since I turned around and saw you standing there, is that what that is? He pushed off the tree. He took 3 steps toward her before he stopped himself, his whole body going rigid with the effort of it, like stopping was a physical act of violence against his own instincts. Yes, he said.
Low. Raw.
Like it had been dragged out of him. How long have you known? The moment you turned around. His jaw tightened. The scent of you hit me like, he broke off. Started again. I could feel you. Before I could see you. Something in me recognized you before my eyes did, and then you turned around and... He stopped again. And... Alara pressed. His golden eyes met hers. And I've been standing here for 20 minutes trying not to close the distance between us. Alara set her field journal down on the boulder. She stood up. He watched her the way a held breath watches the moment before release. Kale. Don't. The word was rough.
Pained.
Don't come closer. If you come closer, I can't. His hands were fists again. This isn't a decision you understand yet. If I touch you, Alara, that's not. It doesn't work the way you think it does. It's not a feeling you walk back from. It's permanent. It's a bond, she said. Yes. And you're trying to protect me from it. Yes. She studied his face, the conflict there, the raw and beautiful agony of a man trying to do what was right when everything in him was screaming against it. What if, she said quietly, I don't want to be protected from it? The sound he made was barely a sound at all, low, involuntary, something pulled from a place deeper than words. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. She took 1 step toward him, then another. I've spent 3 years out here alone. 3 years watching wolves choose each other, watching the way a pack protects its own, the way they move together like they share one heartbeat. Another step. Do you know what I was thinking every single time? I was thinking, I want that. I have always wanted that. She was close now, close enough to see the moonlight catch in his eyes, gold and burning and locked on her face like she was the only fixed point in the world. What if it's not the wolf I'm afraid of, she whispered. What is it you're afraid of, he breathed. That you'll walk away. She met his gaze. That you'll decide protecting me means losing me, and I'll spend the rest of my life on this ridge wondering what the blood moon would have given me if I'd been braver. Kale moved. Not slowly. Not carefully. Not with any of the restraint he'd been holding himself to for the past 20 minutes. He closed the distance between them in 2 steps, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that was almost unbearable given the intensity of everything else, the urgency in his eyes, the tension in his body, the way his thumbs brushed her cheekbones like she was something he had feared he would never get to touch. He looked at her, just looked at her, like he was memorizing her, like he was making absolutely certain she was real. Alara. Her name in his mouth was different now, warmer, deeper, a sound made from something other than restraint. Yes, she said, before he could ask the question. I haven't. Yes, she said again. He kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not the careful, tentative thing of 2 people navigating newness. It was the kiss of someone who had been holding something back for exactly 23 minutes too long and had finally stopped. His hands stayed framing her face, that same impossible tenderness, but his mouth was anything but tentative. It was certain, claiming. The kiss of a man who understood on a cellular level that this woman was his and was choosing, moment by moment, to let her understand it too at her own pace, in her own time. Alara's hands found the front of his torn shirt. She felt the moment the last of his control dissolved, felt it in the shift of his breath, in the sound he made against her mouth, low and reverent, in the way his arms came around her and pulled her in like the space between them had been an injury he was finally allowed to heal. Above them, the blood moon burned. The forest around the ridge had gone alive again, wind moving through the pines, something distant and wild calling from the valley below, the whole dark and beautiful world doing what it always did, continuing, breathing, existing, indifferent to human hearts, and yet somehow always present at their most important moments, as though nature has always understood that love, Real love, ancient love, the kind written in blood and bone, and the pull of the moon, deserves witness. When they finally broke apart, Alara kept her forehead against his. Her hands were still fisted in his shirt. His arms were still around her, holding her with the careful, absolute certainty of someone who understood how to shelter a thing without crushing it. "You're shaking," he said softly. "So are you," she answered. He laughed. It surprised her, surprised him too, she thought, from the way his expression shifted. A low, quiet sound, more exhale than laughter, but real. Present. The laugh of a man who had forgotten, somewhere along the way, that he was allowed to do that. "I've been running this ridge for 8 years," he said, "and I have never," he stopped, pressed his lips briefly to her temple, her cheek, the corner of her jaw, like he was cataloging her. "I had started to think it wouldn't happen for me. The mate bond. Any of it." He pulled back enough to look at her. His golden eyes, she now understood, were not alarming. They were the most honest things she had ever looked into, completely without pretense, completely without walls. Pack alphas don't always find their mates. Some go their whole lives without. And you learn to be okay with that. You build a life around the absence of a thing. And then a woman drives 3 hours to stand on my ridge in the middle of a blood moon and refuses to be frightened of me. Alara smiled. Something in his face when he saw it. Something broke open, softly, like a window someone had finally decided to unlock. "I wasn't frightened," she confirmed. "I know." His thumb traced her cheekbone again. "That was the first thing." They stayed on the ridge for a long time. Long enough that the blood moon tracked across the sky and began its descent, its red-amber glow softening toward orange, toward gold, toward the first gray suggestions of a night on its way toward morning. They talked. Kale told her about the pack, about the 3 families who had been part of it for decades, the 2 younger wolves who'd only recently come into their shift, the way the territory worked and how they kept it, the careful life they had built in the space between the world that knew about them and the world that didn't. He told her about his father, who had been a hard man but a fair one. About his mother, who had been human, fully, completely human, and had loved his father so completely that she'd never once seemed afraid of what he was. Alara told him about her research, about the 3 years of solo field work, the loneliness she'd made peace with, the particular satisfaction of understanding something most people never took the time to see. She told him about her mother's death 2 years ago and the way grief had made her love the wilderness more, the way nature, unlike people, simply continued, and there was something clarifying about that. He listened the way she'd listened to him. Completely. It was, she would think later, the first conversation she'd ever had where she felt entirely heard. Not interpreted. Not managed. Heard. Around 3 in the morning, the temperature dropped sharply. Alara shivered. Kale, without a word, shifted closer and put his arm around her. The warmth of him was extraordinary, not fever-hot, but deep and steady, the warmth of something that had been burning long and low for a long time. She leaned into it. He tucked her against his side like she had always been there. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "is now. Tomorrow is tomorrow." His arm tightened slightly around her. "I'm not the kind of person who plans this part. I don't have a script for," he paused. "For finding you. Neither do I. Then we figure it out. Together?" "Together," he said. And the word, in his voice, had the weight of a promise. Not a casual promise. Not the kind made easily and forgotten easily. The kind carved into something. There is a moment, in the old stories, the ones the elders of the packs tell and retell, worn smooth with repetition, when the bond between mates settles. It is not always dramatic. It is not always announced. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is a woman leaning her head against a man's shoulder as the blood moon begins to set, and feeling something inside her chest, something she had not known was absent, simply arrive. Like warmth returning to a cold room. like a key sliding into a lock it was always made for. Alara felt it at 3:17 in the morning. She knew the exact time because she was still wearing her field watch, and she looked down at it when the feeling hit, a wave of warmth and certainty that moved through her from the center outward, quiet and complete and utterly unlike anything she had a word for. She looked up at Cale. He was already looking at her. His golden eyes were soft, softer than she had seen them all night. The tension that had lived in his body since the moment she'd first turned and found him watching her had gone. Not the aliveness that remained bright and present, but the fight, the restraint, the effort of being near her and holding himself away.
Gone.
You felt that, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. He exhaled slowly. Good, he said. And in that single word lived 8 years of running a ridge alone in the dark, 8 years of leading without a partner, 8 years of building a life around the absence of this, and finally letting it go. Alara reached up and put her palm flat against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat.
Slow.
Steady.
Strong.
And she was not imagining it, synchronized now with her own. The sky over the ridge went dark blue before it went gray. Then gray before it went rose. Then rose before, slowly, incrementally, with the patience only nature truly possesses, it split open at the eastern horizon into a wash of gold and pink that caught every pine needle on the black rim and made the whole ridge glow. Alara watched the sunrise from the boulder where she'd set down her field journal, what felt like a lifetime ago. Cale stood just behind her. His hands rested on her shoulders, gently, easily, and her hands had come up to rest over his without either of them deciding to do it. Her chin was tilted toward the light. His was tilted toward the top of her head. The world below the ridge was waking up. Birdsong had returned. A hawk traced a slow arc over the valley. Somewhere in the tree line, a branch snapped under a weight that moved quietly and deliberately and with a familiarity that made Cale's posture relax fractionally. Pack. Alara understood. Someone checking. They'll have questions, he said quietly. The pack. His thumbs moved in small, slow circles against her shoulders. They'll have noticed I didn't come back last night. Is that unusual? I'm usually very predictable. A pause. I was very predictable. She leaned back against him slightly. He absorbed her weight without shifting, solid and certain. Do you want to go?
No.
Simple. Immediate. I want approximately 17 more hours of this. But I also have responsibilities. The mark of a good alpha. The mark of an extremely inconvenienced one. Alara laughed. It rose out of her before she could be self-conscious about it. Real and unguarded, the laugh of someone who has not had enough cause to laugh lately and is gratefully, somewhat helplessly, remedying that. Cale went still for a moment. Then, like the night before, he laughed too. Quieter, shorter, but real. She turned to look at him over her shoulder. He was watching her with an expression she had no prior reference for, open and undefended, entirely present, like a man who had finally put down something he'd been carrying for far too long and could not believe the relief of empty hands. What? She asked. Nothing, he said. And then softer. Everything. There are stories the moon keeps to herself. But some she gives away. She held this one for a long time. Carried it through seasons, through the turning of years, through 1,000 nights when a man ran the black rim alone and a woman worked late in the field, and neither of them knew the other existed, and yet something, some ancient and patient thing, was already moving them, slowly, incrementally, like tides, toward each other. The blood moon rises 14 times a century. Most nights on the ridge are ordinary, cold and dark and beautiful and empty. But on the 14th of October, the year Alara Voss drove 3 hours and ignored every warning and stood at the edge of the black rim with her camera and her field journal and her absolute refusal to be afraid of the dark. The moon gave the story away. And what Cale Duskmore found on that ridge, standing 40 feet from the tree line, shaking with the effort of holding himself still, looking at a woman who should have run and didn't, was not what he went looking for. He went up there, that night, to be alone. He came back with his whole life. Some things are written before they happen. In the tides. In the blood. In the burning amber eye of a moon that rises only when the world is ready for the stories it has been holding, too important to tell. Until exactly now.